Hey guys, hope you're well. My name is Rob. Welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video, I'll be giving you my NRL Round 23 predictions. I'll leave a recap of last week up on the screen for you now. 4 out of 8 is, as I've mentioned multiple times, the bare minimum. This season is so unpredictable. Like, Super League is ridiculous, but the NRL is just a minefield of randomness, and I do not like it. Especially for someone that makes regular predictions videos. It doesn't really help, does it? But we'll crack on with the first game of this round. Kicking off this round, we have the Rabbitohs taking on the Storm. Starting with the team list of the Rabbitohs. In the backs, they have Jai Gray, Fletcher Myers, Tane Milne, Richard Kenner, Jacob Gagai, Jack Whiten and Cody Walker. In the forwards is David Moale, Damien Cook, Sean Kepi, Cameron Murray, Michael Cheekham and Keen Kalamatangi. On the bench is Peter Mamazalis, Talis Duncan, Thomas Burgess and Shakai Mitchell. In the backs for the Storm, they have Ryan Pappenhausen, Will Warbrick, Jack Howarth, Nick Meaney, Grant Anderson, Cameron Munster and Jerome Hughes. The forwards include Tui Kamikamica, Harry Grant, Josh King, Sean Bloor, Trent Liero and Nelson Asfa-Solomona. On the bench is Taran Wishart, Lazarus Varlepu, Chris Lewis and Alec McDonald. So, a bit of a weird one from the Storm last week. I thought they'd be completely comfortable, especially with Cameron Munster coming back in. I didn't like the fact that Taran Wishart was dropped in his place, but I like the fact that he was at least still in the team to have an impact coming off the bench. The Rabbitohs, I thought they'd compete a lot more closely with a Sharks team that's low on key players, that looks a little bit different to normal. I do basically have a lot more trust in Melbourne Storm right now, so as much as the Storm result against the Dragons was a bit of an outlier, that's not a normal thing to happen, and the Rabbitohs have shown signs of weakness. Especially after their 5-game win streak, they kind of lost a bit of their sting. Especially with Latrell Mitchell being out as well for a little while. That's still going to have an impact on that team. But I do trust Melbourne Storm in this game. And I do think Cameron Munster being out for so long, getting more minutes under his belt, having more training sessions, more team meetings, figuring out what they want to do with him in the team. Yes, I know he's been part of that spine for a lot of years, but it might take a bit of an adjustment period getting used to things again. But for those reasons, it does make me lean heavily towards Melbourne Storm, because defensively, the Rabbitohs have just not been in it. Like, on the attacking side, sometimes they can be in it, but defensively, they've just not really been competing well enough, especially since that 5-game win streak. Those games since then, yeah, they've just not really been competing on the defensive side. The only thing that really gives me any kind of worry for the Melbourne Storm, of course, the fact they lost to the Dragons, but just in terms of the team, Trent Liero moving from 13 to 12. There's no Eliesa Katoa, who is, I think, is pivotal to that right edge for Melbourne Storm. Asfa-Solomona comes in at 13. Maybe he'll, kind of mix in those positions with Josh King and Tui Kamikamica. They'll kind of, mix that up a little bit. Or they'll move him to the edge, maybe put Trent Liero back to 13. They'll probably change things around as they go. They won't be shoehorned into one position, they'll just be locked in. And then still Taran Wishart coming off the bench, plays that 13 role sometimes as the support player, kind of taking on Munster's role or Hughes' roles, depending on, when he needs to pop up. So I think with the defensive deficiencies of the Rabbitohs, plus how strong Melbourne Storm are in attack, plus the personnel they have available, I do think Melbourne Storm, even given the outlier last week against the Dragons, they should be okay in this one, and I feel very confident, especially their attack versus the Rabbitohs' defence. So I'm going to go with the Storm to win, 13+. Next up, we have the Titans taking on the Sharks. Start with the team list of the Titans. In the backs, they have Keanu Kinney, Alafiana Khan-Pereira, Brian Kelly, Philip Sammy, Jojo Fafita, Jaden Campbell and Kieran Foran. In the forwards is Moeki Fatoeka, Sam Verrills, Erin Clark, David Fafita, Cleese Haas and Chris Randall. On the bench is Isaac Liu, Jamin Jolliffe, Josiah Pahulu and Keenan Palacia. In the backs for the Sharks, they have William Kennedy, Sione Katoa, Jesse Ramian, Cale Iro, Samuel Stonestreet, Daniel Atkinson and Blake Brayley. In the forwards is Royce Hunt, Cameron McInnes, Oregon Kafusi, Britton Nakora, Teague Wilton and Jack Williams. The bench includes Jaden Beryl, CSC Vitalakai, Toby Rudolph and Thomas Hazelton. So the first thing I've noticed, of course, and you guys would have noticed, Blake Brayley at number 7. There's no Trindle and there's still no Hines. So it's going to be a tricky one. I know they managed to get it done against the Rabbitohs last week with some key changes, but I do think coming up against a really hot Titans team at the moment, they are really firing. The Titans are in that weird spot I was about the Bulldogs a couple weeks ago, where they are putting in these performances, but I almost don't quite believe it. Like, it's not consistent enough, and it was just, I think in the bigger games, they don't really get it done, but then they started to prove me wrong, and then I jumped on the Bulldogs bandwagon. I'm kind of on the Titans bandwagon now. Mathematically, they can still make the top 8, I'm pretty sure. And I think the Titans are definitely a dark horse if they can make the top 8 and they keep up these consistent performances, because when they play with freedom, when they play with the speed that they've got in the team, which is ridiculous, they are a hell of a team. Defensively, that's kind of gone under the radar a little bit. They've put in some decent defensive shifts, but it's the attack that's really shone above that to a just completely different league. So Keanu Kinney continuing to perform at number 1. I think the backs have done a great job on the defensive side and the attacking side. I think a good thing as well is they've pretty much had the same back line for most of the season, if I'm not mistaken. So they've been able to develop the communication, the teamwork. They understand what their teammates want to do. They've kind of started to lock things down and understand what they want. And the good thing with this team is, especially, I think it was against the Warriors when they battered them weeks ago, they had key changes to the spine. It feels like anyone can kind of fit in anywhere. So I think Verrills might have been part of the spine. I know Chris Randall definitely was. But they can kind of make changes to the spine or even the forwards and it doesn't have a big impact. Their forwards coming off the bench do them a lot of favours through the middle. Even when they are getting beat, which is actually very rarely through the middle, they can still bring on players like Isaac Leo, who's impressed me massively this season, and they can start to dominate through the middle again. But they've got Jamie Jolliffe, Josiah Pahulu, Keenan Palacia, strong forwards that get a lot of work done and don't make too many mistakes from what I notice. On the side of the Sharks, they can be opened up defensively. I think having Blake Brayley at 7 is a bit of a question mark. Maybe it's a case of like with the Titans, I didn't really expect them to have much of an impact with a changed spine, but maybe he could do something at 7. I don't really think so. I haven't got the evidence to support him having a great game at 7. So it's going to really be on Daniel Atkinson to control things. Blake Brayley, I think, will be focused more on the run game. Cameron McInnes at 9, I've never really seen him play that role too much, but if he's quick off the mark, could at least give them some speed through the middle. And I think still changes to the back line. Kale Iro is still relatively inexperienced, but has a lot of experience this season. So is Samuel Stonestreet. That's a mouthful of a name, Jesus Christ. Samuel Stonestreet is still inexperienced this season as well, so he is a key target. So I think right now the upper hand goes towards the Titans, especially with their attacking speed and the Sharks looking a little bit light on key players. I think there's a great opportunity for the Titans to keep going and put another statement win in there. So I'm going to go with the Titans to win 13+. Next up, we have the Eels taking on the Panthers, starting with the team list of the Eels. In the backs, they have Clint Gutherson, Jake Tango, Will Penasini, Blaze Talangi, Sean Russell, Dylan Brown, and Dejan Assey. In the forwards is Regan Campbell-Gillard, Brandon Hans, Waraimu Greg, Sean Lane, Bryce Cartwright, and Ryan Mattison. On the bench is Joey Lussick, Joe Afengawi, Matt Dury, and Dan Keir. On the side of the Panthers, in the backs they have Dane Laurie, Sonia Taruva, Isaac Tango, Casey McLean, Brian Toto, Jerome Luai, and Nathan Cleary. In the forwards is Moses Liotta, Mitch Kenny, Lindsay Smith, Scott Sorensen, Liam Martin, and Isaiah Yeo. On the bench is Trent Tolau, Matthew Eisenhuth, Liam Henry, and Maverick Gaia. For me, this one is another pretty simple game. You've got Dean Laurie, who's still, again, relatively inexperienced, but has plenty of NRL experience as an individual. So, especially with playing the last couple of weeks as well, is going to develop into this team. Still doesn't have the same effect as Dylan Edwards, but over time will be able to put his own stamp on this team and has great individual moments here and there. But it's not the same as Dylan Edwards. Having Luai and Cleary at 6 and 7, still easily take over Brown and Assey. So, whether they could do something, the Eels, I doubt it. But I'll get on to something about the Eels shortly. In the forwards, it looks like it leans slightly towards the Panthers for me, and the bench, I think, is pretty much even, maybe lean towards the Eels. But here's the thing with the Eels. They can have major changes, and this is what I said about Brad Arthur. So any of my Super League viewers, I've been bigging up Brad Arthur. The reason why I've bigged him up, and kind of the Eels, and I hate predicting games for and against the Eels, is because somehow they just seem to be coached well. Like, they can just kind of turn it on. It doesn't matter which key players are missing. Those that come into the team, they'll add their own kind of flavour to the game, let's call it. But they're coached fairly well so that they can at least be in the game. They kind of hang in there and they sort of linger, and then all of a sudden Clint Gutherson pulls something out of his backside and they're just right back in the game, or they're taking the lead. Like, the Eels are such a weird team. They miss key players and yet they can still be firmly in a game. So as much as I feel confident about the Panthers, statistically speaking, for this game, the Eels are just the Eels, and it's just so annoying to predict against. So I think, given that there's still no Dylan Edwards, but there's no Mitchell Moses on the Eels, logic dictates that the Panthers should be fine in this game because of Cleary and Luai and Kenny. Like, the Eels should be fine, but I just know they're not going to be because it's the Eels. But as soon as I go 1-12 for the Panthers, it's going to be 13 plus, or even the Eels will win. I'm rambling on, but I just know the shit that the Eels can bring. But I do think on the edges, the Panthers are better. I'll go with the typical game here. The Panthers are better on the edges right now, stronger through the middle. They've got the better spine to run the game. So as much as this sounds like a normal prediction, I just know it's going to mess up. But I'm going to go with the Panthers to win, 13 plus. Next up, we have the Raiders taking on the Seagulls, starting with the team list of the Raiders. In the backs, they have K.O. Weeks, Jordan Rapiner, Matthew Timoko, Sebastian Chris, Xavier Savage, Ethan Strange, and Jamal Fogarty. In the forwards is Josh Papali'i, Tom Starling, Joseph Tarpany, Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead, and Morgan Smithies. On the bench is Adam Cook, Trey Mooney, Ata Moriata, and Simi Sasagi. On the side of the Seagulls, in the backs, they have Tom Trbojevic, Jason Saab, Tommy Tallow, Ruben Garrick, Lee Hopewate, Luke Brooks, and Dali Cherry Evans. In the forwards is Taniela Paseka, Lachlan Croker, Nathan Brown, Hamal Olakwatu, Carl Lawton, and Jake Trbojevic. On the bench is Gordon Cham Kuntong, Ben Trbojevic, Ethan Bullymore, and Toa Sipley. Here's the thing for me. The Raiders, their performance against the Bulldogs indicated to me that they can, with this team available, especially with Jamal Fogarty in there, can compete with the strongest teams in the league, because I'm now fully on board with the Bulldogs hype train and think that they are the real deal. The Seagulls, for me, are a worse team than the Bulldogs. Even with, like, the class players they've got in there, like Tom Trbojevic, Luke Brooks on his day, Cherry Evans. Croker can be solid through the middle, but doesn't get, it can be a little bit quiet. Hamal Olakwatu on the right edge. And Taniela Paseka is huge in that forward pack. So for me, right now, I think this is the game that goes either way. I really do not know which way to go. The only thing that kind of leans me towards the Seagulls are just those individuals. Is the Raiders, they don't have a Tom Trbojevic. They don't have a Dali Cherry Evans, although I really like Jamal Fogarty. Like, I really think he's fantastic. They do technically have a Taniela Paseka in Papali'i and Tarpany, but sometimes what Paseka can do individually is ridiculous, and they don't have a Hamal Olakwatu. As much as Elliot Whitehead's very experienced and Hudson Young can be a great player, they're not Olakwatu. They're just not. And on the bench, I'd say basically even lean slightly more towards the Seagulls, I think. But I think just because of those three individuals, Trbojevic, Cherry Evans, and Olakwatu, that makes the difference. It keeps them in the game, because I've got a feeling that the Raiders will be in control of most of this, but it will be a couple of individuals for the Seagulls team that just keeps them in it, and I think it's Cherry Evans that wins it for them at the end by a point. I very rarely go for 1 point wins, but I can just see it with this game because I'm so unsure which way to go. I've just got this feeling that the Raiders will just have control over it. They'll be really strong defensively. They'll look pretty free-flowing in attack. They'll have some off moments here and there, but I feel like Fogarty's going to run the game. Ethan Strange is going to be an absolute nuisance on the left edge. But I just think just these small moments from Trbojevic, DCE, and Olakwatu will just add up over time. And it'll just come down to a point. And it's going to be DCE to get it done. I can just see it in my head. But I would not be surprised if the Raiders got it done. Somehow comfortably as well. I kind of like what this Raiders team can do, but it's just a gut feeling that the Seagulls can get this one done. So I'm going to go with the Seagulls to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Cowboys taking on the Broncos, starting with the team list of the Cowboys. In the backs, they have Scott Drinkwater, Cal Felt, Valentine Holmes, Viliami Vailea, Murray Talangi, Tom Dearden, and Chad Townsend. In the forwards is Jordan McLean, Reece Robson, Sam McIntyre, Helam Lukey, Jeremiah Nanai, and Ruben Cotter. On the bench is Harrison Edwards, Thomas McKaylee, Kulikefu Finifeuaki, and Griffin Neame. On the side of the Broncos, in the backs they have Reece Walsh, Josiah Karapani, Katoni Staggs, Dane Mariner, Jesse Arthurs, Josh Rogers, and Adam Reynolds. In the forwards is Corey Jensen, Billy Walters, Xavier Willison, Brendan Piacora, Jordan Rickey, and Patrick Carrigan. On the bench is Blake Moser, Kobe Hetherington, Tristan Saylor, and Martin Tabu. The Broncos. I said this last week. I think I would give them one more week to back them because they basically had a full team available. I know there was injuries, really key injuries as well. But this is the moment I'm going to back them. And if they don't do it, I'm then fully off the Broncos. Because I even said myself, they are a weak-minded team. The Broncos are a weak-minded team. I know there's, certainly Broncos fans that watch these videos. But unfortunately, I mean, you guys will know this, being Broncos fans. They are a very weak-minded team, and they're very annoying to watch this season with so many world-class individuals, and there's only so much Adam Reynolds can do to control the game. There's only so much Reece Walsh can do individually. As a unit, they're just not performing. They've got great individuals. The difference from last season, they worked well as a unit, but when the individuals needed to do something, they got it done. Maybe they're missing Herbie Farnworth. I don't think it's that much of a miss overall for what they've got available, but it's still, as a unit, they're shocking. The Cowboys, they didn't have me convinced maybe the first half of the season because defensively they were shocking. Like, if you look at their points difference, they've scored plenty of points. I think they're well up there, definitely top 5, and that's playing it safe. I think it's maybe top 3. I'm not too sure right now. But defensively, the Cowboys can be awful. But over the past month and a half or so, something like that, they've really shored up the defence and they've started to control games more. Now, I think you look at this Broncos team, without Payne Haas through the middle, so McLean and McIntyre should be fine, taking on Jensen and Willison. And then you've got no Ezra Mam, that takes out a lot of their run game, although it's going to be on Reece Walsh. When you give him extraneous amounts of work to do, you take him out the game later on because he's put in so much work early in the game. Reece Walsh is then knackered later on. Maybe you bring on Tristan Saylor to relieve him for a couple minutes, or you kind of swap some things around. You put Reece Walsh at 6 or Tristan Saylor at 6. You kind of do something a little bit different, but I think Scott Drinkwater and Tom Dearden can work off each other with the run game and wear down this Broncos team. Chad Townsend, as long as his kicking game is on point and the kick chases are good. I think the players on the edges like Helam Lukey and Jeremiah Nanai, they will go toe-to-toe with Piacora and Ricky. That'll be an interesting battle. And Ruben Cotter through the middle against Carrigan, that'll be interesting as well. But I think the versatility in the Cowboys team, their attacking speed, the defensive work rate at the moment, their mindset, just their overall mentality is just a league above the Broncos at the moment. And the Broncos need to get off to a quick start and they need to maintain it. But the Cowboys, as soon as you let the Cowboys back into that game, I think that's when they start to run away with it. And I feel very strongly that the Cowboys could absolutely destroy this Broncos team. Which feels so weird after how good they were last season and the individuals they've still got in this team. But there's just something wrong with the Broncos, man. There's something wrong with them. And the Cowboys, they've sorted out the defensive problems and they look even better on the attacking side, I feel. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win. 13+. Next up, we have the Dragons taking on the Bulldogs, starting with the team list of the Dragons. In the backs, they have Tyrell Sloan, Zach Lomax, Moses Suli, Max Fagai, Christian Tuipulotu, Cal Flanagan, and Ben Hunt. In the forwards is Francis Molo, Jacob Little, Jack DeBellin, Luciano Leilua, Jaden Stewart, and Tom Eisenhuth. On the bench is Hame Sele, Raymond Faitala Mariner, Ryan Couchman, and Blake Laurie. On the side of the Bulldogs, in the backs they have Connor Tracy, Jacob Kiraz, Bronson Cherry, Stephen Crichton, Josh Adokar, Matt Burton, and Toby Sexton. In the forwards is Josh Curran, Reid Marnie, Samuel Hughes, Viliami Kickout, Jacob Preston, and Kurt Mann. On the bench is Bailey Hayward, Lipoi Hopoi, Curtis Morin, and Harry Hayes. First of all, 2 really strong wins for both these teams last week, unexpected from the Dragons especially, and expected but not underappreciated from the Bulldogs, of course, because they came up against a pretty fair Raiders team. So I think this will be an interesting battle. I still think that the Bulldogs are in prime position to win this one, given the consistency through the team as well. I do like some of the stuff that the Dragons can do, especially the support play. I think here's the thing with the Dragons. I think their work rate on the edges is great. Like with the ball, they spread the ball with a lot of speed. Like they set the tone through the middle. They get the quick play of the balls. They attack the edges pretty quickly, and then the support play that you get from Tyrell Sloan is hugely important. A little bit like with what Tyron Wishart does for Melbourne Storm when he came off the bench. Is that support play just popping up where he needs to has that kind of effect. His support play has been great. Kyle Flanagan's short-range kicking game has been excellent. There's been some games where Ben Hunt's long-range kicking game and general kicking has been a little bit one-dimensional. The game against the Seagulls was a prime example of that. The Seagulls had basically no subs available, and his kicking game was so boring. It was the same thing over and over again. It did not work. And did he change it up? No, he didn't, which was very disappointing for me, actually, for such an experienced player to just keep doing the same thing. But there is a new lease of life in this Dragons team. But you look at the Bulldogs, they're just so well drilled and they're so well balanced. I said this about Connor Tracy. I prefer him over Blake Taff because he just feels more balanced to me. He just feels like he just pops up in the right areas. Stephen Crichton, there was all the talk about him potentially being the fullback, but at centre, he just gets so much of the ball. He's a little bit like how Katoni Staggs was or Herbie Farnworth was last season for the Broncos. Like, in the centre position, he just has so much of the ball and has so much of an effect. Doing this individual stuff, he's brilliant at centre and he leads this team very well. The kicking game, long range from Matt Burton is excellent. Short range from Toby Sexton is great as well. So I just think all these small little areas that the Bulldogs have over the Dragons will just lead them to a pretty big win here. I do like what the Dragons have done compared to last season. They're not pushovers by any means. I'd like that for the Dragons. I'm proud of them for being a much better team than they were last season. But the Bulldogs have shone well above that. And in the forwards, in my head, like Josh Curran and Samuel Hughes aren't like these incredible forwards that we look at, but their work rate is great. Kick out and Preston's value is just so important on the edges, and Reed Marnie, as much as he can be, a bit of a pain in the backside for a lot of people, is a quality number 9. I could definitely see him in a Maroons jersey in a couple of years' time. Pretty sure he is a Queensland eligible player, so correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But yeah, and I think Bailey Hayward off the bench has been pretty solid at number 9 at times. So I think it's going to be a tough battle through the middle, and if the Dragons can get one over on the Bulldogs, they can certainly make it interesting. But I think the balance, the individuals, the defensive aspect of the Bulldogs, they are an incredible defensive team. It's ridiculous. Still second, maybe third best in the league. I'll have to check it again. But really strong defensively. They're going to keep out the Dragons for a long portion of this game. So I'm going to go with the Bulldogs to win, 13+. Next up, we have the Dolphins taking on the Warriors, starting with the team list of the Dolphins. In the backs, they have Hamaso Tabai Fidel, Jermaine Isako, Jake Averillo, Herbie Farnworth, Jack Bostock, Cody Nikarima, and Isaiah Katoa. In the forwards is Jesse Bromwich, Max Plath, Tavita Pangai Jr., Felice Kafusi, Conley Lemuelu, and Kenneth Bromwich. On the bench is Oren Keeley, Mark Nichols, Ray Stone, and Sean O'Sullivan. On the side of the Warriors, in the backs, they have Chance Nickel Klokstad, Dallin Wateni-Zelezniak, Ali Leotawa, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, Edward Cossey, Chanel Harris-DeVita, and Sean Johnson. In the forwards is Adam Fanua-Blake, Wade Egan, Mitch Barnett, Murata Niokore, Kurt Catewell, and Dylan Walker. On the bench is Freddie Lussick, Tom Arley, Jazz Tavanga, and Leki Halasima. This could get interesting, but kind of thinking through this game, I'm very, very comfortable for one team. And that's the Dolphins. First of all, I thought the Dolphins would get beaten pretty badly. Not because they're a bad team, but because I thought the Roosters are so good they'd set a statement against the Dolphins. But to make it so competitive, yes, they conceded 40 points. But to put up 34 against such a strong team like the Roosters, not a bad effort at all there from the Dolphins. Here's the issue with the Warriors for me. You'll remember some of the games early on, like when they took the Melbourne Storm right to the end of the game. And there's a few other games in there as well. Here's the thing with the Warriors. There have been a couple times when they spread the ball, They are so quick. There have been times the Roosters haven't matched their speed. The Storm haven't. The Sharks haven't. The Roosters haven't. Cowboys, Dolphins, Titans. There are some teams, when the Warriors are moving the ball at their peak speed, nobody matches it. And I fully believe that. When the Warriors move the ball quickly, nobody can match it. And they look insane. They did it a couple times. I think it was last week or the week before. They've done it very rarely this season. And there's been games especially against the Titans, they just were so lethargic. There was no intent to move. It was just so basic. And the one part of that game and some of the games this season is a little bit like what I mentioned with Ben Hunt. Sean Johnson did the same thing over and over and over again. And that was so disappointing from a player that I rate so highly. He did the same thing again and again and again. If the Warriors come out with that speed that I know that they've got, they will compete in this game. The problem is we don't get it nearly enough. Not even close to nearly enough. It's not even like half the time. It's like 10% of the time we get it. Sometimes it's one or two plays in a game, but their attacking speed could really compete and shut down the Dolphins. But the main thing I like with the Dolphins is that they continue to maintain their attacking speed and it looks really effective. Even missing Jeremy Marshall-King, Max Plather's done a great job at number 9. No complaints about Tavita. Jesus Christ, there's no complaints about Tavita Pangai Jr. so far this season. And the Dolphins have still been a solid team. They're still fighting for that top 8 spot. So this is going to be a huge game for them. And one thing that's still going to help them going forwards is they've not had to make major changes to the back line. Yes, they've had... who was the lad that came? Trey Fuller has had to replace Tabo Fidel a couple times. They've had to make some changes here and there, but they've kept their back line and their backs for the majority of the season. They've been very lucky with a lot of injuries over the past few months. So that's really going to help them going into the back end of this season. And I think, given the kicking game from Isaiah Katoa, I trust it more right now than Sean Johnson, which sounds ridiculous. I think Cody Nikorima's run game is more effective than Harris Tavita. I think Tabai Fidau is more effective than Nico Klokstad. I think the backs overall are stronger defensively and in attack. And I think they can beat up the Warriors through the middle if they're not up for the fight. So I do think the Dolphins are comfortable for me unless... So here's the thing. I think the Dolphins are clear favourites. If the Warriors play with that mental speed that they've got, then I think it's anybody's game. But based on how often they bring that speed and attack the Warriors, I think it's comfortably the Dolphins for me. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins to win, 13+. Finally, for this round, we have the Knights taking on the Tigers, starting with the team list of the Knights. In the backs, they have Kalen Ponga, Fletcher Sharp, Dane Gagai, Dylan Lucas, Greg Marju, Tyson Gamble, and Phoenix Crosland. In the forwards is Daniel Saifiti, Jaden Brayley, Leo Thompson, Tyson Frizzell, Kai Pierce-Paul, and Adam Elliott. On the bench is Jack Cogger, Matt Croker, Jack Hetherington, and Brodie Jones. On the side of the Tigers, in the backs they have Jureen Bula, Solomon Alamalo, Solomona Fartape, Adam Dewey, Charlie Staines, Lachlan Galvin, and Aidan Caesar. In the forwards is Stefano Utokumanu, Api Coruscant, David Clement, Ruben Porter, Samuel Afenu, and Isaiah Papali'i. On the bench is Talon De Silva, Alex Seyfarth, Fanua Polly, and Alex Twall. Here we go. The Knights in attack are the most boring team I think I've ever seen in my life. They look atrocious. I've seen some bad attacking teams, but I said this last week. It's a bunch of men stood in a line waiting for Kalen Ponga to do something. They don't have any runs out the back. There's no depth. I don't know whether they're trying to play this flat style, whether they're trying to play a deep style. It's like spread the ball across the line as quickly as you can and let Kalen Ponga do something. Or let Bradman Best do something. He's not even there for them. So they're missing a huge play in Bradman Best. If they're not at full strength, I don't see the Knights doing anything. Now, I think they can put up some points against a Tigers team that defensively is abysmal. But here's the thing with the Tigers. When they're in a dogfight towards the end of a game, oh my God, do they show up. Like, when the Tigers are backed into a corner and they need to put on a comeback, they can get it done, like, no other. They are ridiculous this season. Now, it's not like... They're still not a great team, obviously, but there's been plenty of times this season they've been in a comeback mode, and they've looked scary. They've spread the ball extremely well. So if the Knights somehow get an early lead and they start backing the Tigers into a corner, the Tigers can really come out with something and fight back in this one, because their attacking speed from early in the tackle count, deep in their own half, looks great sometimes. There are times where the Tigers, they spread the ball early, they go at teams with real intent, and they beat them on the edges. They work their way through the middle with quick play the balls. Api Coruscant eats up those meters. Sometimes finds a line break as well, and you get the support from Jahream Bula or some of the players on the edges. But some of the individuals in this Tigers team can have a serious impact. Jahream Bula can have a serious impact. Talon Silva off the bench, even the very few games he's had this season, he's looked really exciting. He has looked really exciting for this team, but it feels like not that it's a different Tigers team, but it just feels like for a game like this, they should be able to get one over on the Knights, who are so poor on the attacking side. As long as they keep working defensively, I think the Tigers will shut out the Knights for long enough. And I think on the attacking side, with some of the changes to the backs, like Phoenix Crosland is not used to number 7, so his positioning could be a little bit off. I think Dylan Lucas, still being relatively inexperienced this season, and Fletcher Sharp as well, there's some areas that they can look at. Greg Marju can be beaten in the air as well. So there's some holes in that Knights team, obviously, on both sides of the ball. And I think the Tigers can actually get one up on them. So I'm going to go with the Tigers to win, 1 to 12 points. So to recap my predictions for this round, I'm going to go with the Storm, Titans, Panthers to win by 13+. I'm going to take the Seagulls 1 to 12. The Cowboys, Bulldogs, and Dolphins 13+. I'm going to take the Tigers to win by 1 to 12. In terms of winners' confidence, I'm at 85%. The questions for this one, I think somehow the Sharks could get it done against the Titans. I think the Raiders could certainly beat the Seagulls. I think maybe the Knights could beat the Tigers as well. And for some reason, the Eels could just become world-class against the Panthers all of a sudden, because, again, it's the Eels. I absolutely hate predicting against them. In terms of margin confidence, 75%. I think the Rabbitohs could make it close against the Storm, like they could do, but it's the defensive deficiencies that make me think otherwise. The Sharks could still make it close against the Titans. Again, the Eels being ridiculous could just make it a close game. I'm pretty confident with the Cowboys demolishing the Broncos, but you never know with individuals. Bulldogs, I'm fairly confident. Dolphins, fairly confident. And the Tigers, I think if they were to win, I don't see them completely demolishing the Knights. So I think I'm confident with a lot of games, just the margins are a little bit skewed for me. I'm not entirely sure. But that's my recap for this round. So that's going to be it for my NRL Round 23 predictions. If you've got your own, do let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know how you got on last week. But if you did enjoy this video, feel free to leave a like. It does help to get the video out there to more people. And subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with more Rugby League content. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.